Hey guys, hope you're doing well. So, as most of you know, hopefully anyway, we have our mock interview session coming up on Thursday, the 12th of the 12th, 12 at 4 p.m. EST. And when I say we, it's myself, Danielle Mullins, former Miss Earth USA, and Gracie Pfaff, who's our branding expert, also competed in Miss Earth USA, Miss Tennessee USA. If you want to apply for that, we're giving away a free spot valued at just under $1,000 US. Then just head to onlinepageantacademy.com. It's linked in my bios all over the place. If you can't find it, just send me a message. But one of the things, I was having a chat to my good friend ChatGPT over the weekend, where I went fishing, by the way. Caught nothing, but I went fishing. And whilst I was waiting to catch no fish, I asked ChatGPT, what are some of the topics that I can cover in a video such as this, which is unscripted and a bit longer than the 60-second reels that everyone seems to be so fond of? What are some of the topics that I could cover that could really help you with interview, with pageantry and life in general, regardless of whether you decide to join us or not for that mock interview session? Obviously, I'd love you to, but I completely understand it's not the right time for some of you. For some of you, it's whatever. Okay, so, but what are some of the topics that might help you? And the first one that it suggested was why interviews are the key to winning pageants. Why interviews are the key to winning pageants. And I didn't want to just go into that and accept that at face value, because I think we have to question, are they or not? And so I went back to my own personal experience and why I started interviewing in pageants to begin with, and why I've interviewed over 300 pageant contestants from around the world over the last 8 years or so. And for me, it was simple. For me, it was a chance to help you guys tell your story. And why that was important to me was because, to me, that was the only thing that would really set you apart from the other contestants, is not only your story, but your ability to tell it. And I thought, hey, there are many girls who are actually struggling to tell their story effectively. So maybe my gift is to jump on an interview with you and help you tell your story that way in a long form interview, which honestly, I mean, the longest one I did just recently, the longest one I ever did, which was recently, was almost 2 hours. And that's not obviously a pageant interview where you have to condense it into about 2 minutes. Maybe one answer is about 30 seconds. But I've always loved storytelling, and so obviously it was very foundational to me. Oh, sorry, just had to step away for a giant sneezing attack. But I love interviewing. It doesn't mean that it's foundational, it's key to winning pageants. One of the advantages I've had, however, is along with the interviews I've done, I've had a lot of conversations behind the scenes, as you can imagine. I mean, 300 interviews means 300 behind the scenes conversation as to what's actually going on. I also created over 100 podcast episodes and had all those conversations with the guests and with my co-host as well. And one of the things that came up was, I mean, look, obviously most pageants have an interview section and it's weighted, it's marked. Now, depending on the system, the amount of the weighting is going to be different. For some, it might be slightly less. For some pageants, I think the biggest I've seen is maybe 40 to 50%, maybe even a bit more, is weighted purely on the interview. It depends on the system itself. But pageant interviews obviously marked and weighted in almost every system. So that's a given. So it's important for that. One of the other things that was pointed out to me, and I never thought of this, was sometimes, not always, but maybe often, the judges are the same from interview to on stage, or at least some of them are the same. And so what happens is, if you go into interview, and let's say hopefully you make a really, really good impression, something called the halo effect kicks in. Now, what is a halo effect? Very simply, if you imagine what a halo is, like behind an angel or something, if someone presents themselves really well, let's say in the dating sphere, someone looks physically attractive to you, you automatically then start to attribute things such as intelligence, creativity, you automatically begin to weight them all a bit higher in this person that you're attracted to or you have a great rapport with. And so if you imagine in pageant interview, if you make a really good impression on those judges, and then that same judge or some of the same judges, because not all the judges will be the same, but let's say you make a good impression, and then some of those same judges that you made that good impression on are now marking you for your on-stage component. You might think, well, on-stage is completely separate to interview, and it is. But if you've made a good impression on those judges, they're in all likelihood going to weight you or have an unconscious bias towards you in the on-stage component as well. Now, I have to say unconscious or subconscious because that's really important. It's not like, I hope anyway, they're going, wow, that person is the one who interviewed really well, so I'm going to give her bonus marks for the on-stage component. Hopefully it's not like that because that shouldn't be happening. But it's subconscious, it's unconscious. I can't remember the distinction between those two. I think it's subconscious. So again, like in dating, you're probably not going, wow, I'm really attracted to this person, so I'm going to give them 10% bonus points for how intelligent and creative they are. No. But that's important because subconscious means it's subconscious. We aren't aware of it. We can't control it. But it's very important that you're aware that that halo effect is very, very real. And it's real enough that it has a name, halo effect. So for that reason alone, so for those two reasons, pageant interview is weighted, often significantly, and so that makes it important to winning your pageant. The halo effect is very real and probably underrated in terms of the importance it can have. Now, sometimes with pageants, the judges for interview are completely separate to the judges for your on-stage component, in which case the halo effect wouldn't come into play. But if there's any crossover between those judging panels, that's going to be a huge factor. Because if you've heard someone interview and they did really well, they came across as a really good candidate to win your title, to be your title holder, and then you see them on stage, you're automatically going to expect great things from them. And even, frankly, if they fell flat on their face, your brain, again, subconsciously, not consciously, your brain subconsciously will be going, yeah, well, she tripped up on stage, but she did so well in an interview. I still wanted to be my title holder. I don't really care if she tripped up on stage. We all do that from time to time. So I'm going to give her a pass there. Hey, she got up, she laughed it off. She's still the one I want. Conversely, if you bombed an interview and it was an absolute disaster, you ummed and ahed, you didn't get any talking points across, or you don't even know what your talking points are, even then, if you strut your stuff on stage and you slay, again, the judge could subconsciously be going, yeah, she looks great up there, but she didn't have anything to say. And so I don't want her to represent my system because I have no idea what she's going to say. And if she does say something, is she going to say something intelligent or not? So those two already. So obviously it's weighted, number one. Number two, the halo effect. Number three, I think one of the big things for me is that the effect that interview is going to have on your mindset and you moving forward past the pageant. Because to me, winning at pageantry and winning at life, I think the best way to win at pageant is to create an amazing life. And so just with that in mind, I think learning interview, learning communication, more importantly, is probably the most valuable skill you're going to take out of pageantry other than maybe your networking, the network that you make, so networking skills. Because let's face it, no matter how good you are on stage, unless you're going to become a runway model, that's not really super applicable to your real world career as a paleontologist or a lawyer or a doctor. I know people love to say, oh, but if you walked on stage in a bikini in front of 1,000 people, you're not going to feel nervous ever again. From my experience, it doesn't work like that. I shouldn't say I haven't walked in a bikini on stage, but from my experience talking to women who have, it doesn't really work like this. I think it's a nice soundbite to convince you that pageants, when we come up with that relevancy discussion, people like to say, oh, but it's relevant still because, the confidence will cross over. Yeah, maybe. But I think if you're really terrible at interview and you're great on stage and now you go into a job interview in your real life, I'm not sure that on-stage component, that on-stage confidence is really going to help you in the interview. So I think mastering interview and mastering communication, more importantly, and that sales component of it, as in you're selling yourself to be the title holder. That is important in any area of your life, no matter what career you take up. And even if it's not sales, let's say you are a stay-at-home mother, most important job probably in the world, by the way, most underrated as well, and most underpaid. If you're going to influence your child, you need to be able to communicate and sell, right? Sell yourself as a parent. Sell the fact that when you're telling little Johnny, little Tim, or little Sarah, hey, you know what? I love you, but you got to do your homework before you get to play your games or run outside. You got to sell that idea to your child. And I got news for you. In this day and age, you got more competition in terms of how many people want to control the narrative that your children are getting. So for me, for that reason alone, I think regardless of whether you win the pageant or not, I think mastering interview is something that you're going to want to do if you want to succeed at life. And by the way, if you succeed at life, you've got an amazing, career, amazing relationship, amazing family, amazing friends, all that stuff. You're going to want to keep doing pageants just because if you do, not everyone will do, but it'll be a chance for you to showcase everything you've been doing. And so it makes a lot of sense to me when I see someone who's crushing it at life. They got a lot going on year after year. They're growing, they're improving. It makes so much sense to, hey, yeah, let's do a pageant. We can showcase that stuff off. It makes a lot more sense to me than someone who is kind of using pageants as like an escape from their life because they don't like their life for whatever reason. And they're just doing pageant after pageant after pageant, normally, to be honest, seeking validation. And if they don't win, they don't get their validation, they become depressed. If they do win, they get momentary validation, after which they realize actually no one really cares, and then they become depressed. You know what I mean? So learning interview is, the interview component probably translates the most to real world success, along with the network of people that you meet. All that being said, in the pageant itself, if you do well at interview, remember we talked about the halo effect. That's the subconscious effect on the judges. But guess what? There's a subconscious effect on you as well. If you do really well at interview, and I've had so many discussions like this because very often when I see someone that I know who's competing and they tell me that, and they put up a post saying, hey, I just did interview, and I ask them about how did the interview go. If they did well, they are so excited. And you'll know this if you've done this. And if they did badly, they are so crushed, right? Like really, really crushed in a way that to me seems more powerful than even on the on stage. If they go on stage and they're unhappy, maybe they didn't nail a turn, maybe they had a bit of a stumble, they'll be upset, obviously. They're not going to be happy. But it almost seems that interview to all of you is more impactful. Like if you do well, super excited. Yes, I nailed it. If you did really badly, oh crap, I can't believe I bombed. I practiced all this and I failed. Like I practiced for a year and I bombed. So there's going to be a subconscious effect on you for the rest of the competition, isn't there? You're going to be really struggling, I think, to perform at your best in the on-stage component, which, let's face it, could be weighted more than the interview. But you're going to really struggle to give it your best when you're thinking, oh God, I bombed that interview, I messed up my chance to win. Now I'm just going to go through the motions on stage because they're never going to pick me as a winner because I bombed in the interview. Or conversely, yes, I absolutely nailed the interview. They know that I'm the best title holder. I got a really good rapport with the judges. They want me. I can feel it. They want me to be their title holder. Now let's just finish it off on stage. Let's bring it home. And so halo effect is subconscious effect on the judges, but it's going to have a huge subconscious effect on you for the rest of the competition. Now, obviously there are ways around that. Just because you bombed in one section doesn't mean you should carry that on to the rest of the competition. And vice versa, just because you did well in interview doesn't mean you should allow that to distract from your on-stage performance. But that being said, there's for most people, if you do really well in interview, it's going to make you feel great about the rest of the competition, which by and large will mean that you're going to do better. And vice versa, if you did really badly in interview, it's going to be really hard to shake it off. Not saying it's impossible, because it's not, and I work as a mindset coach, and so I can teach you ways to get out of a slump. That's almost one of the biggest things I do when you're doubting yourself or you're depressed or something like that. But all things being equal, if you do well at interview, you're probably going to be doing better for the rest of the competition. And for the newbies amongst us, interview tends to happen before the on stage. That's why it's so important to nail the interview, because everything else tends to come afterwards. I mean, if you're marked on appearances and paperwork and things like that, that may even be before the pageant. But generally, the interview is going to be occurring around about the same time or at the same time as rehearsals. And on stage is almost always the last component. Because if you think about it, you do the on stage and then they announce the winner. You don't do the on stage and then the next day they come back for interview and then they come back and announce the winner. So almost always it's the interview happening before on stage, which means interview has a huge chance to affect your on stage performance, whether you did well or not. So for those reasons, that's been my experience in terms of, as I said, ChatGPT said, why interviews are the key to winning pageants. I don't know that it is on paper all the time, because by on paper, I mean, is it over 50%, for example? Yes, 25% is a major chunk, but if 25% is interview and 75% is on stage, I mean, you still got to nail the on stage. But I think when you think what's going on behind the scenes, particularly subconsciously on the judges and on yourself, but then also if you buy into my argument that winning at life is the best way to win at pageants, that is the whole game in a nutshell. Because I really believe that the most transferable skill from pageant success to real world success is going to be interview. Because it means communication, it means you have incredible sales ability. And remember, sales doesn't just mean you're in a sales job. It could be in your relationship, it could be in your relationship to your children, it could be in your friendship, it could be, well, it will be in every area of your life. Your ability to communicate and influence people is massive. It's a massive determinant in how successful and happy you're going to be in the rest of your life. And that is interview. It is not how well you strut yourself stuff on stage. I'm sorry. I disagree with that. I used to go along with it. It's like, yeah, you got confidence on stage, so that will translate. No. I mean, we can have a debate about this, right? But if you have a phobia, let's say of jumping out of doing a skydive, or you got a phobia of spiders, I don't really care how confident you are on stage in a bikini, you're still going to have that phobia. So that is why I believe winning at interview is very important to winning at pageantry. On paper, it may not be worth the most, but I think when you think of the effect it has on your mindset, the judge's mindset, and your success and happiness for the rest of your life, then yeah, I will give ChatGPT, let's say, a pass on this one for saying it at least was a good topic to cover. So, all that being said, if you need a chance to practice interview, because practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice makes perfect. And if you just need a chance to get real judges' feedback, then that mock interview panel session we're doing with 3 of us judges, and you'll go through real competition pressure in terms of we ask you a question and you've got to give an answer. I think that's going to be absolutely invaluable. That's why it's the first thing that we're doing. You can apply again, onlinepageantacademy.com. We're closing off applications on Friday, the 6th of December at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And one of those people is going to be lucky enough to win the whole thing for free. And that's not just the interview, by the way. We're giving you the recording. That's going to be invaluable for you moving forwards. Also an AI pageant coach, a pageant interview coach, a coach that's going to be able to train you, give you questions and give you feedback. I was working on that on the weekend. Actually, I made a bit of a breakthrough with that, which blew my mind. But anyway, and also a session from me, a video recording session from me on how to nail interview using the state, story, and strategy framework, which is something that comes from my work as a life coach with Tony Robbins. So, look, I strongly encourage you to obviously participate with that. But the thing is, you need a chance to practice. I see so many girls trying to practice interview by answering questions in their head or by answering questions into a mirror. And to me, as a tennis player, that's like you trying to win Wimbledon by thinking about tennis. It doesn't work. The best way to win at interview is to do interview. But the problem is it needs to be as realistic as possible. And if you're practicing in your head, you're practicing in the mirror, there's no competitive pressure. You're probably reading the questions so you know the questions beforehand. It takes out probably the biggest hurdle, I will say, because when you apply, you'll see a section that asks you what your biggest hurdle is, what your biggest obstacle is. The one that is equal first is, what should I do with difficult, and unexpected questions. I can't remember what the other equal first is, but it's basically handling the difficult or unexpected question is the thing that seems to be tripping you guys up the most. And I will say, guess what? When you practice into the mirror or practice in your head, you take away that hurdle because you've got the questions written out beforehand, or maybe you got a list of 100 questions, whatever, but you've got the questions. And so you don't have that hurdle. And you might think that's great. To me, no, that's terrible. Because if that's your biggest hurdle, I'd best practice overcoming that hurdle, not running away from it, right? And so the reason that I'm so excited to do this, or why we came up with it, myself, Daniel, and Gracie, was I think the thing that a lot of you are missing out on, frankly, is a chance to practice this for real. You know, you can get a runway or a gym, or you've got a long hallway at home, and you can practice your walk day in, day out. And a lot of you do that. You absolutely should do that. That's great. But then when it comes to interview, and I spent the last 20 minutes discussing how important an interview is, but I see so few people who know how to practice interview. I mean, like, forget any of the feedback that you get from us three coaches. Just think about that for a second. How often have you practiced interview under realistic conditions? And if the answer is, well, the only time I actually really get to do interview under realistic conditions is at my actual interview at the pageant. And then, so what you're telling me is you get to practice this thing, which we already discussed is super important. You get to practice it once a year or once a pageant. And I'm going, well, unless you happen to be, lucky enough to ace interview just because you're born that way, it's no wonder to me that you're struggling and you're not getting the improvement that you could make because you're not getting a chance to do realistic practice. And so for that alone, whether you contract with us or not, as I said, Online Pageant Academy, Friday the 6th of December is that cutoff. Get your applications in. Just because you apply doesn't mean that, you have to pay. The application process is free. If we choose you, then yes, you have to pay $97. I should have said that, sorry. $97 US, but the value is close to $1,000. Whether you do that with us or not, you're going to want to find a way to do realistic practice. So someone giving you a question, someone staring at you whilst you give the answer, and then sure, giving you the feedback straight away is maybe not realistic, but the reason we do it that way is because we give you the feedback straight away, then maybe you can do the question again and give a better answer. We give you the feedback straight away, then you can do a better one. You can iterate, improve. That's how you improve in anything. There's no point in me when I was doing tennis, and I taught myself tennis, by the way. Not the easiest thing to do, which is why I know my stuff when it comes to how to improve at something. If I had hit 100 balls and then, only then, looked at the 100 shots that I hit, I would have forgotten what I was thinking when I did shot number 1. And so there's some improvement, but there's very little improvement. Whereas if I hit one shot, look at it, analyze it, iterate, feedback. Okay, hit shot number 2. Again, analyze, feedback, iterate. Can you imagine if I get you to practice the same interview question 10 times in a row and give you feedback each time, or just encouragement? How much are you going to improve in those 10 times? I would wager that you're going to improve more in those 10 times of iterating the same question again and again and again and again and again intensely. You'd improve more doing that than you would in a year of sitting in your car practicing questions out loud in your car. All right? So that is the biggest thing, is regardless of whether you go on with us or not, you're going to want to make sure that your practice is realistic as possible, which means you got to incorporate some of that pressure. Do not run away from that pressure. It will bite you in the butt big time. I think it was Billie Jean King, because again, tennis player, but Billie Jean King said pressure is a privilege. Pressure is even more than that. In this case, it's going to be your advantage. If you have incorporated pressure into your practice, you've made the practice harder than the real thing, not easier, because you want your ego to be stroked that, hey, look, I'm so good at interview now, and then you're wondering why when you do the real thing you bomb. It's because you haven't practiced with that pressure. And so whatever you do, make sure that your practice is as real as possible, as accurate as possible. And for me, that really means you've got to incorporate pressure into it. Whatever it is that is your phobia or the area of biggest struggle for you in interview, incorporate that into your practice. Don't do the easy stuff. Do the hard stuff, because you don't have to worry about the easy stuff. It's easy. You'll nail that regardless. It's the hard stuff that's going to trip you up. And sometimes we don't practice it because it makes us feel not so great. It makes us feel like we're struggling, we're failing, we're frustrated. And I get that. But that's the exact reason why you need to practice with it. So I hope this all made sense. I got a bit off track there just at the end, but I absolutely believe that interview is key to winning pageants. Maybe not score wise, but for the effect, the halo effect, the subconscious effect on you as well, but also that transference of interview skills, communication, sales skills are going to be massively important to you in your real life outside of pageants. So, and again, if you want to contract with us, online Pageant Academy, applications closing on Friday, December the 6th. The application process is super simple. It's like your contact details, which areas have you struggled with most, what's the biggest takeaway that you want from the session, and why do you want to work with us. Basically take you 5 minutes to fill out, so go fill that out. And I would love to work with you. Danielle, Gracie, and myself we're looking at those answers as they're coming in. Some of those answers are like really, really exciting because we can see where we can really, really help you move forward. So, online pageant, onlinepageantacademy.com. Go there, apply before Friday, December the 6th. But regardless, I hope this has been helpful. Practice with some pressure, and I will speak to you next time.